to talk about is not in the book, but I'm Jim Knut Larsson. I'm the author of the Human Pathway. I'm here with Bree, who's Miss World Beauty and Fitness. And I found it to be very necessary to make a commentary. Today is August 16th, 2010. And Bree brought up a very interesting point. And that is that we have had the coldest summer in California. We are located here in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And this summer has been the coldest summer in over 30 years. Most people would take, what happened to the global warming? It is cold. It's like winter in San Francisco in the middle of summer. And it's true, it's been extremely cold here. Now the reason why it is cold is because the continent of the United States is much hotter than it was before, and also you have a much more heat around equator than we had before, and hot air is lighter than cold air. So hot air goes up, okay, and it creates a low pressure, and so cold air would then flow from the cold high pressure region into the hot region with the low pressure. So what happens right now is that cold air, because of the heating of the sun of the middle of the United States, much hotter than before, and the equator is much hotter, it's pulling the cold air from the polar region down much further south in certain portions of the earth where, and especially it would be pulled down around the coasts, okay, of the big continents, both in the southern hemisphere as well as the northern hemisphere, okay, coming from Arctica and from Antarctica. So, the cold summer in San Francisco is a huge manifestation of the heating of the earth, because the low pressure created by the heat around the equator on the continents are now pulling the colder air from the polar region much further south, okay? But what happens is that now this cold air is being heated up much more than it was before, because it's pulled much further south in the middle of summer. Now that was used to be cold air and now heated up, being heated up, and now circles back into the polar regions.
Right.
And creating a much warmer Arctica and Antarctica, which then turns into much more melting of the snow.
That's right, melting
and the ice.
That's right.
And the average temperature on Earth is going up. So if you have temporary cooling of certain regions on Earth, can be a huge manifestation of the heating and the warm and the global warming. That's my point. Okay. Now, the Earth, the sun is 30% hotter now than it was when life appeared. So the Earth is primarily kept at 71 degrees average temperature of the entire Earth. That's the average, which is the optimal temperature for life to exist, okay? That temperature is kept pretty constant by the biosphere, okay, and the interaction of all the life forms, which I talk about in my book, okay, is the typical example, which is borrowed from the book Gaia by James Lovelock. He brought up that example in his book. And that is, you can think about a planet with black and white flowers. White flowers reflect the radiation back into the space. Black flowers absorbs the heat, right? So, when that planet, this is in a nutshell how it works, okay? When a planet gets too hot, heating up, it gives an advantage to the white flowers. Given that the optimal temperature for the flowers to thrive is 71 degrees Fahrenheit, right?
Right.
So the white flowers is spread over a larger portion of that planet to cool it down.
Right.
When it starts to get too cool, and the temperature starts dropping underneath the 71 degrees, it gives advantage to the black flowers.
Yeah.
So they start spreading over a larger surface of that planet.
Right.
So that is in a nutshell how the biosphere on Earth is regulating the temperature and creates its own best environment for its own survival. While on Earth with the biosphere, this process is much more complex, okay?
Yeah.
And probably much more powerful as well. But it's other factors too, of course, the distance from the sun and all of that. The problem is that the biosphere and the natural mechanism on the Earth can only regulate the temperature up to a certain point. So what can happen, and this is a scary thing, that we have this happen this year, is that the temperature, the average temperature of the Earth used to go, like this over the centuries, okay? Smoothly. Now, for these last 20, 30 years, it started to go, it starts to go more and more with bigger and bigger fluctuations. And those fluctuations can be, it is much colder in that portion of the Earth that year, okay? And the curve is down here, right?
Yeah.
But it's starting to become unstable. So suddenly we have a summer following, extremely hot on portions of the Earth. And we got the oscillation starts to go. And the fear is that when the oscillations between cold and warm is the final, breaths, so to speak, of the biosphere. So at some point that oscillation can become so big that suddenly
off the charts.
Yes, it suddenly got stuck up here. One super warm summer.
Right.
And there is not enough regulating mechanism left naturally in the biosphere, and by taking the cold air from the poles and all of that is no longer working right.
Yeah.
And suddenly the oscillation stops. And that is where the Earth would have a heart attack and die. And convulsions and die.
Yeah.
And it would be no way back.
No turning
you would
back.
have runaway heat happen on Earth, and all life would be gone at that point.
Yeah.
And we are in the process of creating exactly that scenario. So the temperature would go like this, and suddenly would go, inflation. Temperature, the ocean would burn off, the atmosphere is gone, we have a new Mercury, okay? By the pure idiocy of humanity. So after 3.5 billion years, which is 3,500 million years, was wasted. Including humanity, you and me and you. All of that was wasted because we did not have enough awareness and thinking and enlightenment to take action. And rather than taking action, and as I say in my book, the consequence of the finding, scientific finding, that the biosphere has the ability to create its own best environment for its own survival between all the animals and plants and all the processes that's going on. The logical conclusion of that is that the biosphere, life itself, in order to survive beyond the heating, gradual heating of the sun, which is the maturity stage of the sun, is estimated to last for about 10 billion years. Very interesting enough, about 3.5 billion years ago, given the composition of the atmosphere of the Earth, the circling of the Earth around the sun, and its eternal rotation, the natural temperature on Earth become around 71 degrees Fahrenheit. And it lasted for about 100 million years. During that time frame, life suddenly appeared. And from that moment on, when life took hold on Earth, life has been able to create its own best environment for its own survival. Not only from a temperature standpoint, but actually the first life forms converted the carbon dioxide and the methane atmosphere into oxygen, which had made it possible for animals and plants to go from the ocean up to land and all of this.
Right.
So, the natural consequence of that ability of the biosphere to create its own best environment for its own survival is to produce a supernatural being. When I say supernatural, it means a being who has the ability to understand and manipulate nature.
Right.
Beyond what nature is able to do by itself by natural mechanism. And I make the statement that that being is human beings. So, one of the great destinies of man, which should be obvious to everybody on this earth, and everybody needs to be educated about it, is to preserve life. And and to preserve life, which means that we need to take the step out into the universe to escape the solar system at some point in the future. The consequence of it is then, rather than driving the Earth into the ditch, which we're doing now, we need to become the absolute custodians of life,
right,
and manage the Earth for its maximum survival, and to make sure that the biosphere is healthy and the Earth is a healthy organism,
right,
so it lives as long as possible, because it's going to be a race between our technological development and the heating of the sun.
Correct.
So if this Earth is destroyed for all life, and life did not escape, the whole thing is meaningless.
That's right, yeah.
What is the purpose then of working, having children? Because we got to look at, one of the great destinies in my life was to have children and care for my children, right? Don't we want our children to have the same life and have children and have children and continue the greatness of humanity and the greatness of all the life forms on the planet? We want that. That gives us a deep sense of meaning and purpose. So, one of the goals with my book is to create the conversation and the enlightenment with as many people as possible on the earth, so we all become aware of that this is an action which is embedded in us,
right,
and which gives us a great platform of meaning and purpose initially.